And today we're going to look at how with Python we can build stuff with AI. And I'm actually trying to focus on how we can do so with relatively little Python and little Python knowledge. And you can sort of build on that. I think having these projects in your pockets will definitely enable you to put together proof of concepts, and then later on, perhaps even minimum viable products. This is great stuff for people who are about to do hackathons. This is great stuff for people who are learning Python. And this is great for people who have ideas that wish to explore them. I think there has never been a better time to learn how to code apps, and I'm super excited to share this stuff with you. So what we're going to build is this basic application, a very basic AI-powered slogan generator. And you can make it generate tweets or songs or whatever you want. And basically you can write a topic. So let's say mangoes, and it will give you catchy slogans for that topic. So here, sun-kissed bliss, tropical temptation, and basically whatever topic you give it, you get a return of some sort of a bunch of actually slogans. We can give it holidays, and go ahead and hit submit and see what comes out. Yep, joyful moments, festive cheers. And I purposely kept this as simple as possible to give you kind of room to imagine and explore and decide what it is you want to create using generative AI. But you can take these principles way further. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to use is called few-shot learning. And few-shot learning is a way where you give a few examples to a large language models. And based on these examples, the model is able to kind of understand the basic idea of what your completions are going to be formatted like and what it is you're looking for. And we're going to be wrapping the famous GPT 3.5 Turbo, which powers ChatGPT. Now there's also GPT-4. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to be using OpenAI's API, which is extremely powerful, and it's a great way to get started. It also provides an API for fine-tuning and creating your own models, which excel at a particular task. Okay, so OpenAI has this thing called the playground. And the playground is a place where you have a graphical user interface that interacts with the API. And this is very powerful because it allows you to rapidly experiment. So the system in this playground, and you'll see that there is two when you're dealing with the chat API, there is the system messages and the user and assistant messages. The system is almost the premise for who the persona of the AI is. So you can tell it to be a sarcastic bot, you can tell it to be a slogan generating assistant, or anything you want to be the premise for your model in this application. So think about what are the baked in truths that your application is going to have. And that's the system message. Next, we have our few-shot examples. And here, basically, I gave it generate slogans for pineapple. So I made it super simple. Or I could just write pineapple. And then I gave it a response by my assistant. So the assistant says tropical delight, burst of sweetness, and I gave it a bunch of examples. I don't want to have, to call the API over and over for each slogan. And what I've also done is I separated my answers by a period. And this is great. If you're using few-shot learning, you can separate by commas, by periods. You can create a certain JSON format and have a back and forth where the bot answers you in that particular format. So it's really learn by example. You don't want to overdo it with the examples. 1 or 2, even 3 are fine. If you have too many, you're starting to give a few too many tokens, which both limits the output amount of tokens and also can take a hit on your performance of the system that you're trying to build. Next, there's this configuration here, and you have these presets that you can play with. You can choose a model, and I encourage you to try different models. It's very fun, and actually the least powerful model that you can get away with is probably the best one to go with. You don't want to overshoot. You can save time and you can save money by using less powerful large language models. And by less powerful, I mean, they still have many, many parameters. Today, we've gotten slightly spoiled. We are at the age where, 50 billion parameters is not the largest large language model anymore, which has drastically changed in the last few years. But sometimes smaller models are just the right ones, and they're extremely quick and get the job done. Here, I've chosen chat and I've chosen GPT 3.5 Turbo. Now, I've set a maximum length of output to, 256. And once again, you want to check what's right for your application. And temperature is sort of this thing where how much do you want answers to vary from time to time? How risky do you want the output to be as opposed to how predictable? It's almost as if we were to say, how creative do we want our models to be at the cost of accuracy and predictability? By the way, if you get a chance, head over to the playground and play with temperature. It's quite interesting, and it really gives you a deeper insight as to what makes these models tick. Finally, there's the stop sequence. If you're using the chat interface, you have your examples broken down into, the user asks a question, the assistant answers it. But if you're using another model, you want to provide a stop sequence, a sequence of characters that that the computer is going to look at or the model is going to look at and know that separates between two examples. But when you're using chat, that's taken care of for you. Finally, there is, testing our prompts. So if I say sustainable AI, I give it a user message in the playground, and I see that I get, building a better future, mindful innovation, AI for a greener world, and that's pretty satisfactory. So once I get what I want as far as testing goes in this graphical user interface, what I'm going to do is I will basically delete the test messages and go on to producing code. Now, how do I put this all into code? And actually, the answer is relatively simple. Because a lot of times you think that, wow, I have to go to the documentation and check everything. And you should go to the documentation. But OpenAI provides you with this view code button, which will put your GUI or graphical user interface example into API code. And basically, it almost feels like cheating because you wrote your prompt and you spent all this time crafting it. And there's your Python. And it's great. It's actually following best practices. It uses environment variables. You see that system message at the top and the user message and the assistant message. And pretty much you're all set to go. So next, we need to think. So once we have that, that's nice. We could sort of run this, but then we would be left with sort of a plain Python script that we could maybe run from the command line or in a notebook. We need a way to wrap this up. Now, if you're creating a minimum viable product or a production grade application, I encourage you to check out something like Django. That's one way of looking at it. But But if you're just creating a proof of concept, there's nothing faster than perhaps Flask, which is a great way of going about this. And if you're wrapping this, you can think about it as I could wrap this as an API, as a RESTful API, which I can use in a single page application, in a mobile application. I can wrap it up as GraphQL. I can use a multi-page app. Those are going out of style. But if you're just playing around, maybe that's the quickest way to get something started. And that's actually what I'll be doing in this tutorial. I will show you how you can sort of change this into a RESTful API. And finally, you can change this. You can wrap this in a chat interface. I think I misspelled interface. I apologize about that. So with Flask, you instantiate an app. You get your OpenAI key from an environment variable. And the way you do that is you export the key that you get from the dashboard in a terminal. Next, you have your app route, which here it's index.html. Once you have your index route, you're good to go. Now, what do we put in our route? Our index route here is going to, first of all, check if it's a post request. If it's not, it's going to return a render template with no context. And if it is, it's going to first grab the topic from our form, which you'll see in a second. Then it's going to create a response with that OpenAI code. So you see that OpenAI code that was generated for us before. You just plug it in. And then we have our raw slogans, which is a list of slogans. And remember, we have one string, and we're going to split it by those periods that we taught our model with few-shot learning to separate our examples with. Finally, we're going to return a rendered template where the slogan is the slogans are the slogans, and the topic is the topic that the user inputted. Finally, after everything's done, if there's no return, you return just the template without the context. Now, what happens in index.html? Index.html has a basic form, and that form has a text input where you place your topic and a submit. But after that, we have those Flask templates that are going out of style, where if I have slogans, I'm going to loop over them, and I'm going to print out each one of my slogans or place it in an ordered list. Now, if I wanted to turn this into something that returns JSON that's a little bit more like our RESTful API, I could create another route which returns the same slogans, but I could use the JSONify method from Flask, and I'll have something that returns JSON that's good enough for a POC. If I am to develop this and take this further, there are two things I may want to consider. One is using Django and Django REST framework, which are great Python libraries. Another is I could place this in a Lambda function on AWS or some sort of serverless setup. And also I can have it interact with, some sort of third-party chat interface like WhatsApp or Slack or whatever, or Teams or whatever I want to wrap my application in. So now that we've talked about wrapping those existing models, I'm sure you're thinking, wow, I don't want to depend on OpenAI and the big companies for everything. And it's your right not to completely want to build your business on this, or perhaps you've built something wrapping these up and it's time, to roll out with your own AI, and there's no reason not to try. You can save some cash, and also perhaps having your own AI is going to be your competitive advantage. And I'm sure after this session, you're going to build something great, and perhaps it's time to roll your own AI. So there are a few things in this ecosystem that are good to know. The first one is Hugging Face. Hugging Face is the GitHub of artificial intelligence. It's the one place where you can find models and data sets, and there's something for everyone there. And it's relatively straightforward to use and wonderfully documented. It's, like I said, it's the GitHub of AI. There's Google Colab, and that's when you want to experiment with stuff. It's a code block interface similar to a Jupyter notebook, but it runs on Google Cloud Platform, and you can place some serious compute power for relatively cheap under those notebooks. So greatly recommended. If you see something on Hugging Face and you want to see how it runs, go ahead and open a Google Colab. I'll show you how in a minute. Finally, there's AWS SageMaker. It's a little bit more work than Google Colab, but you can produce endpoints or really wrap your AI models in the context of an application relatively with ease. So here you can take those notebooks and you can create these endpoints to interact with and really place this in your application. So let's get to Google Colab. And we've done text generation, so let's take a look at image generation, sort of like Midjourney. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pip install Transformers agents. In this one, I'm using agents. You can also go for a specific low-level model like Stable Diffusion or some of the GPT type models that they have there. These are not OpenAI's GPT models. There are different versions of transformers there. And transformer, by the way, that's the T in GPT, which is generative pre-trained transformer. But here we're not using GPT. And next, you'll see that with about 3 lines of code, I'm able to generate an image, which is quite incredible considering how these things seem to be difficult to use. But no, open source has come a long way and you can really make stuff happen. So here I import load tool from transformers and I say that my image generator is load tool and the tool is called text to image. And this is a pretty high level API in Hugging Face. And finally, I say that my image is an image generator where the prompt is a realistic unicorn in HD. And here is the realistic unicorn in HD. I'm not sure how high definition this is, but maybe that's just me not spending enough time on prompt engineering for this. And when I decide to, sell this unicorn for $1 million, I should probably work on my prompting a little bit further. But this is open source technology at work. This is what we're getting from open source AI, which is quite great considering that a lot of people think this playing field is limited to just a few companies. Great. So one thing to note is that if you pay a couple of bucks, you do have the ability to place a lot more compute under these models, which is going to come a long way. So here you see that I have a few options. I think that the free tier of Google Colab gives you the ability to run many of the models, but for something like $9.99, which I think is the price of 2 or 3 lattes these days, you can get some hefty machines running these models and you can make magic happen. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and ask if there are any questions here.